Welcome to the deep dive. This week we are unpacking the anatomy of a family crisis, and it all unfolds across just 48 really intense hours.
Yeah, we're using source material that examines
Yeah.
that really delicate balance between, your own personal freedom and what you owe your family.
It's a phenomenal setup.
It really is.
Yeah.
So the sources we're pulling from, their excerpts detailing this family, the Zelenskys. They all get together in Charlevoix, Michigan,
Right, for an anniversary.
for Mirabelle and Max's 35th wedding anniversary. But this is no simple celebration. It's more like a stage, a stage where every major unresolved conflict from like the last 30 years just converges in one spot.
It's a total pressure test for the whole family unit. We've got
Yep.
the matriarch, Mirabelle, who's dealing with this hidden, life-altering medical decision.
And at the same time, her kids are grappling with, everything. Financial ruin, deep, deep loneliness, and accidental pregnancy.
And all of this is set against this long marital history, all these deep-seated secrets. And then, as if that's not enough, a literal storm, a natural disaster, just hits them.
Yeah. So our mission today is really to get past the plot points and dig into the emotional physics of this whole situation.
Right.
Like what happens when the cumulative weight of all these secrets from one generation to the next just becomes too heavy.
And how does that pressure strip everything away? It forces these characters, often really painfully, to face who they actually are.
And to make these pivots they desperately need to make.
We'll be focusing a lot on Mirabelle Mira, she's the matriarch, and her fiercely independent but, potentially fatal choice is really what underpins the whole weekend.
And of course the three adult kids, Katya, Ivan, and Irina. They're all fighting their own hidden battles, and they are completely in the dark about the true scale of their mother's crisis.
So let's unpack this. All right, so let's start with the matriarch, Mirabelle Zelensky, Mira.
Mira, yeah. She's a college professor, and she's really defined by her counterculture past. A real hippie, Her husband, Max, is this super successful thriller writer.
And they're hosting this whole anniversary thing. But right from the jump, the source material gives us this heavy, inescapable context.
Yeah. Mira has breast cancer.
And it's not a minor diagnosis either. The sources are very clear on this. The tumor is large, it's aggressively located right behind the nipple.
Which means the recommended course of treatment it's intense. A mastectomy, followed by chemotherapy and radiation.
But this is where the core tension of the whole story really begins, because Mira has made a decision, a definitive, unilateral decision.
She has decided she is not going to do any of that.
Yeah, none of it.
No. She rejects the idea of surgery, the chemicals, the radiation. She's opting for a more holistic, non-Western approach.
Yeah.
So, Ayurvedic medicine, acupuncture, deep meditation.
And this choice, it's so much more than just a medical preference. It's a philosophical declaration.
It absolutely is. I think the key thing here is her motivation. It's completely rooted in her identity. She sees refusing this treatment as the ultimate act of controlling her own death on her own terms.
She does not want to become what she calls the poster child cancer patient.
Exactly. She won't endure these procedures that she believes will, and this is a quote, sicken me, sap me, disfigure me, all when the final result is the same.
So in her mind, she's fighting two battles at once. There's the cancer, but then there's this loss of self that she's terrified of.
Yeah. She's afraid the treatment will leave her with a rubber boob and the hollows under her eyes, that it'll make her unrecognizable to herself. This is Mira fighting the image of herself as, fragile or old or critically irrelevant.
Right. And that fear of being irrelevant, it goes beyond just her appearance. She's worried about her job, her professional standing. She's afraid her colleagues at the university will try to, quote, hustle me out the door like a drunken party guest who stayed too late.
So her refusal of what she calls industrial medicine is really an assertion that her life and her ending have to be authentic to who she's always been. The nonconformist, the Birkenstock-wearing, hippie.
It's a profound existential move.
It is. But there's a contradiction right away. To cope with the stress of all this self-sovereign nonconformist Mira is regularly toking up. She's smoking pot.
For deep relaxation, she says. She admits that the diagnosis requires her to make time go slippery.
So it's self-medication. It's an attempt to escape the reality that her carefully constructed philosophical defense is, already starting to crumble.
And that brings us to Max, the husband. He writes these high-octane thrillers, the Dash Hammond series, under a pseudonym, Maxwell Playfair.
And he is desperately, desperately worried. But the sources, they paint him as almost emotionally crippled. He just can't force the issue with her.
He tries to respect her choice, even though they had one terrible explosive argument about it right at the beginning, where she just completely shut him down.
And Max's reaction, it's shaped entirely by their history together. Mira is keeping the cancer a secret, but the sources reveal this old, powerful secret of Max's.
He cheated on her.
Years ago, yeah. He was lonely and drunk on a book tour. He confessed everything, expressed this deep regret.
But that detail, it just adds this massive emotional leverage to Mira's position now. Max is clearly walking on eggshells around her.
Oh, completely. He's operating with this tremendous debt of repentance. He probably feels like he squandered his right to really pressure her, even when her life is on the line.
So this old transgression, it almost acts as an enabling factor. It allows Mira's unilateral, potentially fatal decision to stand unchallenged by the one person who loves her the most.
And that debt is compounded by Mira's own emotional complexity. While she's carrying the pain of what Max did, she, in turn, has these unresolved feelings for Paul, a colleague of hers at the university.
Right. She flirted with him, maintained this electric current of tension for years, especially when Max was deep in his manuscripts and, as the source says, barely alive to the family.
So this history, it means their 35-year marriage, while it's obviously endured, is built on this foundation of mutual emotional hedging and, carefully managed imperfections.
It suggests that the family myth, this loving, perfect, long-term marriage, is actually a much more complex structure. It's built on confession and debt.
And Mira's self-assertion, her refusal to be defined by her illness, it even shows up in these tiny little details, like what she decides to wear to the party.
Exactly. Katya, her type A daughter, picks out this suitable, very matronly frock for her.
And Mira rejects it outright. She says she'll either wear her olive green summer dress or, and this is so significant, her old yellowed champagne-stained wedding dress.
It's a literal assertion of her identity. She's saying, I am Mira, the youthful hippie, the woman you married. I am not the patient. I am not the matron.
She's fighting conformity right up until the very last possible moment. Her entire sense of self seems to be tied to maintaining that nonconformist image, even if that image is now threatening her own survival.
It's a really compelling portrait of identity just clashing violently with mortality. So now we have to move to the next generation. There are 3 grown children, and what makes this source material so compelling is that every single one of them is locked in their own private existential disaster. And they are all working desperately to hide it during this anniversary weekend.
They're almost proof that Mira's whole philosophical approach to parenting, which was designed to free them from petty arguments and resentments, completely failed.
Yeah, Mira reflects on that. She thinks they ruined all her best-laid plans just by growing up any way they want to.
Which really means they chose paths that Mira fundamentally disagrees with.
Let's start with the eldest, Katya. She is the embodiment of everything Mira isn't.
Oh, completely. She's the planner, the coordinator. She's obsessed with external order, material success, the gleaming granite countertops, the Coach bag, the Escalade. She's the classic type A perfectionist.
Her entire identity is this meticulous rejection of her mother's hippie ethos. She lives by discipline and appearance, and she's constantly criticizing Mira's lack of order.
She even takes personal offense at a magnet on Mira's fridge that said, "Boring women have clean kitchens."
Right. Katya actively chose to be a boring woman if it meant she could have control.
But the psychological root of that need for control is so important here. We find out later that it all stems from this old fight with Mira over a prom dress, a blue, roughly prom dress.
And Mira, in her desire to enforce her nonconformist values on her daughter, she returned the dress. She ruined Katya's night.
And Katya's entire adult life, her pursuit of wealth and material control, was her calculated revenge against her mother's emotional chaos.
And now that carefully curated world it's devastatingly collapsing. Her husband, Charles, the corporate executive, is constantly avoiding her.
He claims he's golfing or working late. Katya suspects he's having an affair with his assistant, Tara. But the reality is so much worse than a simple affair.
She finds damning evidence on his laptop. The crisis isn't romantic, it's financial. Charles has been involved in serious financial malfeasance.
Embezzlement, specifically, using funds from Peterson Enterprises for their own personal luxuries. A Sub-Zero fridge, a jacuzzi.
The irony is just crushing. Katya built her entire life on Charles's ordered corporate success as a rejection of Mira's instability. And now she finds out her foundation is built on theft And lies.
And those lies were specifically to buy the material status symbols that she craved. So the collapse isn't just financial ruin. It's the utter disintegration of her identity as the successful, controlled older daughter.
And this collapse, it drives her toward this desperate, almost teenage behavior. She's secretly driving by the house of her old high school boyfriend, Tom Petrocelli.
Yeah, she risks her own kids seeing her, but she's chasing that feeling of simple youthful connection, that specific visceral jello-in-your-stomach feeling that she hasn't felt in decades.
She's actively looking for an identity that wasn't built on Charles's fraud. Later, during the blackout, she even calls Tom.
Vents about her ruined life, trying to find some kind of escape hatch back to a time when her choices were simpler.
And the fact that a woman answers Tom's phone is just the final, crushing nail in the coffin. The past is also unavailable to her. She is completely stranded in her present disaster.
Okay, so then we have Ivan, the middle child. He's the struggling artist, a high school band teacher who dreams of being the next Bob Dylan.
But he fears failure so deeply that he barely even tries.
Exactly. He identifies himself as the dull middle child who squandered his genetic bounty. His whole crisis is one of self-worth.
He operates under the safety net idea that if no one knows you're trying, then no one can ever know you failed.
And that fear of judgment, it just prevents him from achieving anything. It locks him in this cycle of self-deprecation and artistic stagnation.
So the party, for him, it offers this cruel twist of attention. He was recently dumped by Barbara, who's described as gorgeous with cascading auburn hair.
But she shows up, unexpectedly, signaling interest. And for a moment, Ivan feels validated. But the sources are quick to clarify her real motivations.
She is only interested in him as a means to an end.
She realizes his father is Maxwell Playfair, the famous writer. She wants to use Ivan to get her own writing noticed by Max and by his agent, Jane.
We see it play out at the dinner table, right? She just aggressively steers the conversation toward Max's career and his contacts.
So you have Ivan, this man who is desperate for a genuine connection, and he's faced with a choice. On one hand, you have Barbara, who offers this superficial validation and conventional booty, which he craves because it makes him feel less dull.
And on the other hand, there's Jenny, his true friend.
The one who's witty, quotes Monty Python, has a yoga symbol tattoo and is genuinely there for him.
And Ivan is just paralyzed. It's the battle between validation and true connection. He's so starved for the ego boost that Barbara provides that he risks overlooking the one person who actually sees him.
The struggling artist beneath the band teacher.
Finally, we have Irina, or Rini. The youngest, she's only 21, Mira's impulsive butterfly who avoids responsibility so completely she doesn't even own a cat.
And her crisis is the most immediate and physical.
She shows up having just impulsively married this guy Darius, an older sales manager, an MBA student in Vegas, and she's pregnant.
But the ambivalence is extreme. She sees the baby not as a child, but as a growth, a burden, one step shy of a tumor.
Her initial plan is, it's shocking. She plans to get a divorce or an annulment, give the baby to Darius to raise, and then potentially go back to her abusive ex, Alex.
And this is where the source material gives us that critical insight into her trauma.
Yeah, that past relationship with Alex was terrifying.
Irina reflects on how he'd call her horrible names, hit her, throw her against walls, even bit her shoulder.
The trauma was so severe that she had to text Van with this frantic, desperate message, "Help P, come get me," just to be rescued after Alex locked her in his condo.
That history of abuse is key. It shows that underneath her impulsive, carefree facade, Irina is deeply damaged and prone to self-sabotage. She chooses partners or life paths that reinforce this idea that she's disposable, as Ivan later accuses her.
Her desire to abandon the baby and go back to Alex reveals this profound failure to value herself. She just can't see that she deserves a stable, healthy future. For her, motherhood is this immense, unwanted burden.
So what unites all three of these kids is their absolute determination to hide their internal rot, to keep up this veneer of normalcy for the anniversary.
Katya hides her ruin behind the Escalade. Ivan hides his loneliness behind forced jokes.
And Irina hides her trauma behind these sudden, shocking announcements. It's a massive structure of unspoken misery, all gathering to celebrate a fabricated perfection.
A perfection that we soon see the coming storm is about to violently destroy. So the stage is set for the inevitable collision. The party's at the Lighthouse Inn. It's outwardly lovely, a trio of musicians, dozens of friends.
And Max and Mira are just struggling to hold it together. And the secrets, they start bursting forth almost immediately. It starts with Irina's rapid-fire announcements.
First, the surprise wedding to Darius.
Yeah, which really irritates Mira. It makes her feel robbed,
Yeah.
robbed of the chance to be a mother and be there for her daughter's life event.
So Mira, the woman who is demanding absolute autonomy in her own death, is resentful that her daughter claimed autonomy in her life choices.
Right, but then the tension becomes physical. The heat, the stress of early pregnancy. It causes Irina to faint on the balcony.
And that medical scare forces the second announcement, the baby.
The reactions are so revealing. Max is just stunned. He's described as having a zombie face before he manages this forced congratulatory hug.
And Ivan's immediate concern is that Darius is bossy.
It's that protective reflex, right? Driven by the memory of having to rescue Irina from Alex's control.
And Katya, the controller, is probably just calculating the public optics of this whole new impulsive mess.
Mira, meanwhile, she needs to process all this shock, and her own dread is just mounting. So she finally starts to confess her own burden. She seeks out two key people.
First, her longtime friend, Patty.
Mira confesses the cancer diagnosis to Patty over a quiet drink. And the scene is so complex because Patty, who's receiving the secret, is also the neighbor who casually reveals she knew Mira had missed her mammograms for years.
So that unintentional revelation, it forces Mira to confront the fact that she had been willingly avoiding the very thing that might have caught the tumor earlier.
It shifts the confession from a demand for sympathy into an admission of personal negligence.
She then turns to Paul, her colleague and old crush.
Paul represents that intellectual and emotional connection she felt was missing when Max was lost in his writing.
But Paul, instead of indulging her philosophical stand, he urges her to fight, to stay for Vax and the children. He says, "You're tough enough to beat this."
And Mira, fiercely defensive of her autonomy, rejects it outright. Don't tell me what I have to do.
It just reinforces that her decision is tied up in a lifetime of resisting external authority, even when that authority is advising her to live.
And yet, that brief warm shiver she feels when Paul touches her shoulder is a subtle reminder that her emotional life with Max is still complicated. Paul represents a path she never fully resolved.
Meanwhile, the emotional chaos shifts to the children. Ivan, pressured by Katya, gives his toast.
But his already shaky self-confidence is just annihilated by the realization of Barbara's transactional motives, which are fueled by her behavior at the dinner table.
The dinner table is weaponized. Barbara uses the small talk to aggressively shift the topic directly to Max's agent, his contacts.
Confirming Ivan's worst fears. That she's only there to advance her own career. This betrayal of trust, this manipulation of his deep need for connection, it's the final trigger for Katya.
And Katya, who is just driven by this bottled-up fury over Charles's financial ruin and her own unraveling life, she acts out. It's this unprecedented defense of her vulnerable brother.
She publicly humiliates Barbara in the car on the way back to the house, snatches her phone, forces her out into the stormy night.
And this action is so crucial because it's a necessary purge of Katya's contained rage. She can't scream at Charles, the architect of her ruin, so she screams at Barbara, the user.
She's asserting control over something, the moral defense of her family, even as she's losing control over everything else.
But the tragic consequence is that Ivan, still caught in his cycle of self-sabotage, immediately pushes away Jenny, the true friend who drove 3 hours to be there.
He tells her to go home, and she drives 3 hours back, alone, in the worsening weather. It just compounds his loneliness and his guilt. He literally pushes happiness away in favor of his familiar misery.
And the secrets just keep bleeding out. Patty, Mira's tipsy friend, stumbles and drunkenly tells Irina to take special care of your mother.
Which confirms the children's suspicions. It leads Irina and Ivan to frantically speculate about the illness, a spot on her nose maybe, since she never used sunblock.
But they decide, in this moment of fragile, protective solidarity, not to pressure Mira yet. They're still trying to preserve the facade of the anniversary.
And the family's mounting internal chaos is immediately mirrored by the external environment. This fierce, sudden storm hits Charlevoix.
Yeah, a tornado watch, a total power outage. This storm is the great equalizer. It's a literal force majeure that strips away all the masks of superficiality and control that everyone, especially Katya, relies on.
The blackout forces intimacy, but also total vulnerability. And the first thing Katya does when the lights go out, which tells you everything about her psychological state, is not look for candles.
No. She calculates whether Tom, her old boyfriend, would be awake for her to call.
And then we get this critical revelation about the next generation, the pot discovery. Katya, the hyper-disciplined mother, finds out her teenage sons, Chip and Taylor, are high.
They found Mira's emergency joint, the one hidden in a lipstick case in her purse.
This is just a devastating moment of generational hypocrisy being exposed. Mira defends her private choices, but regrets bringing the pot into the house. But the real sting comes when Katya confronts her sons.
She tries to enforce discipline in a moment of pure chaos.
And the boys just smirk. They reveal the weakness in Katya's foundation of control. They confess they'd built up an immunity to her threats because they knew she would never actually enforce punishment.
Chip delivers the brutal line, "We always figured if it really meant anything to you, you would have made us do it."
And that quote just exposes Katya's failure to be a present, enforcing mother. It's another massive crack in her facade of the perfect life. Her control was all performative, designed for outside observation, not for real parental guidance.
And this leads directly to the explosion. All the suppressed tension of the weekend, Mira's secret, Max's fear, the kids' misery, Katya's failed parenting, it all just explodes in the dark living room, lit only by flashes of lightning.
The children confront Mira about her decision to refuse cancer treatment.
And the arguments are raw, desperate, and cruel. Irina, terrified about her own unplanned baby, just screams, "How could you do this to me? I have a baby coming." She weaponizes her own vulnerability.
And Katya, channeling all her rage at Charles and her financial ruin, she's cruelly sarcastic. She uses her intellectual control to inflict pain. She quotes Shakespeare, urging Mira to go out like a true tragic hero.
And then she says she needs her mother now more than ever, just highlighting the selfishness of Mira's choice.
Mira, cornered, just throws their own failures right back at them. She defends herself by saying her influence on their lives was nil anyway.
She points out Irina's history of choosing abusive partners and Ivan's professional paralysis.
And her ultimate defense is rooted in that lifelong adherence to autonomy. If I'm going to shuffle off this mortal coil, is my own damn business.
This is the source materials raising the ultimate question about independence, right? Can any person, especially a parent, claim total autonomy when their life and death have such profound impacts on the people who depend on them?
Mira tries to assert her right to self-determination, but her children are forcing her to see the collateral damage.
Max finally steps in, shutting off the radio to stop the static and the shouting. The family is just overwhelmed. They're forced to go down to the cold, cobwebby cellar.
The spooky, low-ceilinged basement that Katya hated as a child. It's the symbol of the family's neglected foundation.
And they huddle there on an old picnic blanket by the unstable light of a Coleman lantern.
The physical danger and the claustrophobic space, it forces this moment of instinctive, primal survival. They cluster together.
Katya, Charles, and their kids, Rini and Darius. And significantly, Van imagines he's holding Jenny's hand, even though she's miles away, driving through the storm.
The storm rages. It culminates in a thunderous vibration and a fearsome crack as something massive hits the ground nearby. But despite the chaos, they are sheltered together for the first time all weekend.
Katya even notices Max's old camping mattress propped up against the wall for protection, the visual symbol of preparation and protection finally doing its job.
This forced physical closeness in the face of shared peril, it begins the process of shifting their focus from individual misery to collective survival.
So dawn breaks after the storm, and the physical destruction is this perfect mirror for the emotional and financial ruin the family is now facing. The chaos forces an immediate confrontation with reality.
The damage is severe. Katya's pristine Escalade, the external symbol of her status and her meticulous life.
It's destroyed, smashed into a U shape by the neighbor's felled tree. The symbol of her material success is now just junk.
But the more powerful, more symbolic destruction is the massive century-old maple tree, the big tree in the front yard. This tree, which was taller than the house, it filtered the morning light from Mira's study. It's been violently ripped up by the roots. It leaves this vast, muddy crater and is blocking the whole road.
Van is devastated by it. He feels a stitch in his chest over the loss of this unspoken family anchor.
And the destruction is immediate for Katya. The Escalade is gone, and the financial ruin Charles confessed to is just inescapable. She confronts him again.
Forces him to confirm the embezzlement, the bad investments. He admits they never fully recovered from 9/11 and that he risked everything for status symbols to maintain the life Katya demanded.
And disgusted, Katya pulls off her diamond ring, the symbol of the affluent life she built. She realizes it was all based on theft and deception.
She's ruined. But, critically, the collapse of her wealth is the destruction of the personality she adopted to rebel against Mira.
And this forces her reckoning with her children. She finally disciplines Chip and Taylor, grounds them for the entire summer.
And it's a massive, significant, enforced punishment. She's finally demonstrating that her word means something.
Chip's earlier revelation that they behaved badly because she never enforced anything now drives her toward genuine present motherhood.
And the real pivot comes when Katya finds her old sketchbook and starts drawing the fallen tree.
She's reconnecting with the artistic part of herself she suppressed years ago. And that suppression, we have to remember, it began with that fight with Mira over the blue, ruffly prom dress.
Right. Katya wanted conformity, Mira forced nonconformity, and it resulted in Katya choosing the path of material control as a form of lifelong rebellion.
By drawing the tree, she is symbolically sketching the destruction of her false self. In her moment of utter brokenness and loss, she realizes she needs Mira.
Not as an ideal, but as a human link to her own authentic self, the self she suppressed. She realizes she's been losing herself in the pursuit of appearances. It's a profound reversal of their generational conflict.
Meanwhile, Irina is facing her own physical crisis. She starts bleeding, a potential miscarriage scare, and she immediately calls for Mira, not Darius.
And this moment brings Mira bursting in hair wild, face marred by sleep and stress, and she's displaying this genuine, unguarded maternal panic.
Mira advises her it might be normal, but she's horrified that Irina hasn't even seen a doctor yet. It just reinforces Irina's failure to plan for this new life.
But then Darius returns, and he's visibly upset by the potential loss of the baby, revealing that he had lost a child before.
And Irina witnesses his genuine grief, his commitment. She sees his potential for being a truly devoted father, even if he is bossy.
This softens her ambivalence. She realizes her initial desire to leave him and the baby was selfish, a reflection of her own trauma and immaturity. She starts to step into her adult identity, realizing that the baby deserves a mother who wants them.
Which is a direct and necessary reversal of her earlier plan to treat the child as an unwanted growth.
And Ivan, too, is forced into maturity. He's driven by guilt, by the knowledge that Jenny drove 3 hours home alone in the storm, and he tracks her down.
Her car was blown into a lawn during the storm, a physical manifestation of the emotional chaos he caused.
He apologizes for choosing Barbara, and he confesses this deep, insightful truth. He says he would rather miss Jenny as she pursues her dreams than have her miss out on life because he selfishly wanted her to stay.
This is Ivan shifting from prioritizing his own needs for validation, for company, to prioritizing her happiness. It reveals a new level of emotional maturity.
And that emotional awakening then translates directly into his art. He performs a new song for the family, one he wrote over the turbulent weekend, detailing all the chaos, just staring down at his guitar.
And he reveals this genuine, unexpected talent. The entire family, even Charles, is stunned into silence. He gets the validation he so desperately sought, not through status, but through authentic expression.
And it's Jenny who then encourages him, suggesting he should go to Nashville.
The collapse of his emotional life forced the birth of his artistic life.
So all of these personal revelations, they all converge on the immediate climax. Mira's final, defiant gesture.
She's still high, and maybe she's seeking closure or escape, but she walks out onto the pier, leans over the railing, feeling like the prow of a ship, flirting with the edge of her mortality.
And her family, Max, Ivan, Katya, Irina, they rush out. They see this act as a desperate and selfish, maybe even suicidal gesture.
This is the moment the children finally, violently stop enabling their mother's autonomy.
The peer confrontation is brutal because it's a confrontation rooted in desperate love. The children are fueled by panic and the residual rage from the blackout, and they violently confront Mira.
Katya yells, her type A control just dissolving. Your actions do have something of an impact on other people, asserting the interconnectedness that Mira denied.
And Irina screams, "Mom thinks her life is hers to throw away," which just highlights the profound betrayal they all feel.
But the confrontation turns on Max's intervention, which is strategically brilliant.
He steps in not by arguing about the cancer treatment itself, but by redirecting the children's energy.
He urges them to show support and empathy rather than rage. He asks if any of them had given their mother a hug, or asked, "Is there anything I can do?"
Max's action forces them to stop weaponizing their own pain and to return to the act of simple, unconditional love.
He creates the emotional space for vulnerability, a space where Mira's philosophical defenses just cannot survive. He hugs her tightly.
And in that physical connection, she confesses the truth that her nonconformity had been shielding all along. "I'm scared shitless. Absolutely out of my mind, terrified."
She admits her fear of reconstruction, of being disfigured, but ultimately the love is stronger than the fear. She concludes, "I'd miss you, Max, more."
She realizes that the raw, desperate, even ugly love of her family, which looked like rage just moments before, was exactly what she needed to feel relevant and chosen.
Her autonomy is replaced by the realization of her obligations.
And the decision is made instantly. It shifts the trajectory of the entire family. Mira agrees to call the doctor the next morning to discuss her options.
So it doesn't mean she's committed to conventional treatment, but she has committed to options. And critically, she's committed to fighting for her family.
The emotional transformation of the family is immediate and powerful. The sources describe the mood instantly lifting. Conversations bubble up like champagne in a flute.
The family is visibly content. Max and Mira toss his reading glasses carelessly onto the floor as they kiss, a symbol of their messy, enduring, and now transparent love.
The departures are emotional and tender, and they mark true emotional progress. Katya gives Mira the tightest hug she can remember, finally showing genuine, unguarded need for her mother.
And Ivan and Jenny leave together, planning to walk the shore. Their relationship now solidified by his apology and the shared crisis.
Mira watches them all leave, realizing that her decision to open her mind to treatment options has brought this moment of intense peace and connection, despite the chaos outside and the overwhelming tasks ahead.
And this brings us to the final transcendent image of the source material. Mira is watching the chaotic cleanup of the massive fallen tree, the noise of the chainsaw roaring in her chest.
But then she sees a butterfly Irina's nickname dancing near the muddy crater.
And she looks down into the enormous hole left by the big tree and sees tiny green shoots pushing up from the dirt, already reaching for the light.
So this deep dive into the Zielinski family crisis, it really provides a powerful framework for understanding how immense pressure can dismantle old structures and enable new growth.
The central theme is that this extreme convergence of crisis, illness, infidelity, financial ruin, unplanned pregnancy, and a natural disaster is what finally strips away the superficiality and forces a family to confront their deepest needs.
It's the collapse of that idealized family structure that allows the truth to finally come out.
And we saw these two massive generational reversals driven by the storm. Katya recognized her desperate need for Mira, discarding her obsession with material status and reconnecting with her true, suppressed artistic self.
And Ivan. He stopped chasing that superficial outward validation and instead found his voice and committed to genuine love with Jenny.
And Mira's core conflict. Her initial belief that she could control her fate by refusing treatment, it crashed violently into the reality that her life and death are intrinsically intertwined with the lives of her children.
Her final pivot, it wasn't a philosophical choice. It was an act of profound obligation driven by the raw, desperate love of her family.
So the source material doesn't end with a resolution. Mira hasn't started treatment. Katya is still ruined financially. Irina is still pregnant.
It ends with this powerful image of potential.
Exactly. The violent ripping away of the old established anchor, the big tree, is what created the necessary space, that vast, muddy crater, for the tiny green shoots of new life to become visible.
And that structural destruction is often required. The most difficult losses of status, of health, of belief systems can be the precursor to the most necessary forms of growth.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought. If a relationship, a family structure, or a cherished belief system must be violently destroyed to reveal the potential for new, necessary growth, what is the big tree in your own life that might need to fall for the true light to finally come through?
That massive anchor that has provided shade but is now suffocating the ability to reach for the light.
Something profound to consider as you navigate your own terrain.
Until next time.